everyone. Welcome back.
Welcome back to another episode of our poddy.
Hope you're all well. Hope you've all had a nice week. Hope everyone's all good and feeling good and doing well.
Hope you're having a nice Wednesday morning.
So this week actually we got someone actually sent a question in saying that they'd like to maybe have like a discussion or a topic that was all about the idea of how do you basically sort of cut your losses, so how do you sort of walk away from potentially toxic relationships or people that maybe maybe you were friends with once and then you've grown apart, and how do you sort of close the door on those things? And then we thought it'd be a good idea to maybe just sort of broaden that out and talk about the concept of loss within itself, right? So maybe like the idea of you sort of growing up apart from people and cutting out bad habits and cutting out bad potentially toxic relationships, and how you'd go about doing that, because that is a very hard thing to do, especially if it's been if those relationships are ingrained in you, or those traits have sort of become a bit habitualized. So we thought we'd maybe talk about that today, the sort of the art of loss and cutting ties, but in a way that's sort of healthy, and not in a way that's sort of like, where you're sort of distancing yourself from people and things from the wrong reasons. But
like how to know when it's healthy is probably a tough one. But yeah, thanks a lot for the question as well. I know they said that they wanted to ask it anonymously, but we really appreciated the message, and it's nice that people even think of asking us for advice. Like, that's a really nice feeling, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's
really
like
nice.
One of the highest compliments to say to someone, like, how would you do this, or what do you think of the situation? And it's really nice. So yeah, thank you for putting that to us.
Yeah, thank you. And we did have we then put a poll out on Instagram. Not a poll, it was like a question and answer thing, and we asked some people for what their tips were for like how they've sort of broached the idea of moving on and letting go. Yeah, I think that's the best way of saying it, like letting go of things and people. And we had a lot of nice people writing in and giving us their tips, so we're going to be talking about those as well, which is nice, because that would be nice to sort of get an insight of how other people approach that.
And then later on we've got a cool thing to reveal as well, something that we've been working on just for the past few weeks, like a project, a challenge, something that we're going to launch in May. So we'll tell you all about that as well a little bit later on.
Sounds good.
So yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's start off with the idea of what this person was asking. I think the crux of what they were talking about was how do you... I've got the question on my phone, but my phone's recording, but I think it was something along the lines of, how do you sort of walk away from relationships with people that are bad, and how do you sort of like keep the door closed or close the door, or how do you go about that? And I think that's something that you and I I think a lot of people go through that, especially if it's to do with this idea of you're trying to get better, you're trying to better yourself, and I feel like that's something that you and I have had with people in the past, right? We've been and it's interesting because we've been on the end of like, okay, like it's not, I don't think it's everything of like, this big thing where you walk out of the bar, you're down your shot, and then you slam the shot glass on the table and you say, we had a good run, partner, and time's up, and then you go and live a life of sobriety. I don't think it's like that.
No, I'd say it's not as dramatic. It's kind of a gradual, like, drifting apart, isn't it? But it is natural. I think the first thing to say is that is a totally normal thing to experience, because hopefully the point is that you're always changing and developing and growing, so that you will naturally then grow apart from people and grow towards other people. So kind of seeing it as you might grow apart from people, but the further you move away from those, the closer you're moving like towards yourself, or the closer you're moving towards people that like really bring you up and reflect you and like in a positive way. And you know, it's, I think like I sometimes feel like I'm not really super close with anyone that I grew up with like through school or anything, and I'm always like, oh, you see people who've got these friends that they've had for like 20 years and stuff, and they're super close, you know, they're like this, and you sometimes feel like, oh, why don't I have that? But you know, it's kind of like, I don't know, you might just, things might just not pan out that way for certain people, and then not through anyone's fault necessarily, but it's just you go, you know, one dog looks one way and the other dog looks another way, sort of thing. But yeah, it's a tough one though, because I think it's hard, because you're sort of saying you're closing a chapter on people and on a part of your life, so it is difficult.
I think you know, I think the trouble with it comes is because you, in our case, what was happening was that we were in a you know, not the best place, and then we made a conscious effort to say, like, okay, like, you know, the things that we're doing, irrespective of the people that we're hanging out with, you know, they're not constructive, and they're hurting us and they're damaging us, and that is overflowing into, you know, subtle things that you do. So, you know, if you, big things like, you know, drug taking and alcohol abuse and you know, like leaning on crutches and then maybe hanging around with, you know, super overtly toxic people, you know, those are all big things. But then, you know, it sinks into little things as well. It sinks into like how you think about things. It sinks into like your sleep routine, you know, it's like how you talk to yourself mentally, you know, those things then, which they start to take over. And we, through trying to better ourselves in those ways, we realized then, where it was like, well, you have to do work on yourself, don't you? And you have to put time in where it's just you, and it's you and your mind, and it's you and your body. And once you've done that for a couple of weeks, and you say like, no, I'm not going to go out, and I'm not going to go and meet up with these people, because that'll lead to drinking and smoking, and maybe you're in one of, you know, circles where you just talk shit about other people, which you know,
or you
is
just sort of complain about things, maybe like people's kind of overtly negative attitudes can like really sink into you, you know, like
what, you know, it's like, oh, the job, you know, bad jobs, bad this, bad that, and then you don't do that for like a fortnight, and then you go back to that, and it's very clear that it's like, okay, like this has changed, like I'm different, I'm trying to be different, and I'm trying to be better, and I'm trying to focus on the good things that I've got going in my life. And there's people there that haven't come to that realization yet. They've not got that level of awareness that you might have, or that incentive that you might have, and as a result, it's very, very hard to keep that relationship or that dynamic going, because they're basically on, you know, you're trying to move towards one end of the spectrum. And from my experience, the more that you articulate that, the more conflict that you have with those people. It's this idea of, well, why aren't you drinking? Well, why aren't you, you know, oh, like, you know, if you've ever been in a situation where someone's talking about the negative, and you refute everything they say with something negative with something positive, it's almost as you can feel the tension in the dialogue. It's almost as if that true. It's like, why aren't you just accepting what I say as like, yeah, it's terrible. It's, instead of trying to say, no, things are good, just go with me on it, and sort of nurture that toxicity. So those kind of things become really, really apparent when you start moving away from those relationships. And then I suppose the sad thing with it, and I think that, you know, then what the really hard part is that you have to come to this conclusion in your mind where you have to sort of close that chapter, and you have to say, well, a lot of those good things as well, and a lot of the good times that you had with these people, you know, when you were a bit younger, when you were a bit more not as aware, maybe you were a bit more immature, and that's fine, because we're all, you know, you're young and you're going through your own journey, and that's totally fine. But you sort of have to close the door, and that's sad, because you realize that you can't really get that back, because to get that back would mean you'd have to go back yourself. You'd have to sort of lean into that ignorant state of, well, let's just do whatever, let's just be, and that's a funny thing with self-awareness. I think when you become self-aware to that level of like, this isn't good for me, I'm trying to look after my body, my health, my mind, and you see those things work, like, those healthy habits work, it's very hard to go back and say, well, I can go back and hang around with these people and get back into that mindset. And I think the reality is that you never can. It's like the self-aware, it's kind of like a curse in a way, like the genie in a bottle thing. Once it's out, you can't get it back in, kind of thing.
And it's like I was going to say before, the more that you feel those conflicts and stuff when you're sort of changing a bit, the sooner or later you just kind of stop getting invited as well. You kind of stop getting involved, and through people doing things without you and stuff. And that also reminds me of that quote that's like, when someone doesn't like the boundaries that you're setting, it's because like you don't fit into their like box of what isn't right, sort of thing. Like, if someone's like, challenging you on stuff, it's because you're moving away from the idea that they thought they had of you. So if you're feeling like you're worried about, or you're concerned about this idea of letting go of like a toxic friendship or a toxic relationship, it's kind of like if they're already treating you that way with conflict and with comments and this negative thing, it's because like they're already seeing these boundaries that you're putting up and they don't like it. Like, it's almost like they almost stop caring what makes you feel good and what makes you feel safe, because they're only concerned from their perspective and how they want you to behave. So then in that way it kind of lessens the load on you, because it's like, if they had my true interests at heart, they wouldn't be treating me this way.
That's
you
right.
know what I mean?
They would go the other, if they were truly friends, they would say, yeah, you're right. Like, if you said like, look, I'm trying to better myself and I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that, or no, I'm not going to drink tonight, or no, I'm quitting my job to start this other thing,
or even just, I don't like the way even if it's not a toxic thing in terms of drugs or alcohol or like general, your behavior, even if it's just they're doing things that are toxic and you say, I don't like when you do that, and they're not willing to hear you out and listen and adapt and take on your feelings, then it's like, they're kind of just in it for themselves. And
you know what though, I feel as if that like, whenever you see people, whenever you see that conflict with people or within a relationship, if you can sit back and say like, look, I'm really trying to make a difference, like I know I'm trying to better myself, and through that it might seem like you're the one that's causing the conflict, but if you can genuinely sit there and say, no, it's for the right reasons, I'm trying to get healthy, I'm trying to get better, what you'll always find is that the people that try and keep hold of you, or they keep that toxicity going, all that's happening there is you're reflecting something that they're lacking within themselves and they don't like it. And so that sounds a bit convoluted, but for example, if if you've not seen someone in a week and you go and see them this week and you say, you know what, I went to the gym a couple of times this week or I went for a run, or I put a lot of time into my relationship with this, my partner, and we did some really good stuff, and I did some soul searching and I was really trying to figure out what it was, and maybe I read a couple of books, basically stuff that wasn't like, had this bender where I woke up and I can't even remember what happened, I was so pissed, and all that's happening there, if you get resistance from that person, it's because that person's looking, going like, shit, like I know I should really, it's a really subconscious thing. I don't think a lot of people would admit to it, or not unless they were in a very self-aware place, which they're probably not. But I speaking from experience, when I've been that person on the toxic side of it and I've seen someone get better, I've sort of done that. I've kind of been, looking back, it's like, I know that it's been a thing of like, I know I should be doing that because they're trying to get better and they're killing it. And then, you look at them later down the line, it's like, I should have been doing that for so long, and I should have been nurturing that, and I should have been bumming them up and saying like, that's amazing, like I want to do that, like can we do this together, because you're building yourself up, and as a result you're making more connections with good things. You go in better places, in better directions, and I want to go with you. I want that as well. But a lot of the time people don't have that self-awareness to sort of say, oh shit, like I think they're doing really good things, and maybe this thing that I'm doing isn't so great, and I need to take a look at that. So I guess I guess it's a thing where, any time that you try and go against the grain and better yourself, you are always going to have some conflict with people, and that idea of sort of closing the door, or saying like, well, look, I'm just gonna or even keeping it ajar and going like, I'll just, I'm gonna go and do my thing, and if you want to sort of, if things change or you get some sort of if you want to change through that, then maybe we can change together. Like with any relationship, you have to change with each other.
Or it's like kind of thinking, well, yeah, it's tough. Like if you feel that your paths are diverging and you're going one way, it's kind of basically saying to the other person like, look, I'm going this way, and this is good for me, this is really working. It's not that I don't want you there, but it's like I can't force you and like drag you along with me. Like you have to want to change as well. And do you know what I mean? It's not like oh, like I don't not want you there, but I can't take you with me. Like you have to be there on your own terms as well.
That's right.
Or it's that thing of saying like, well, if you're gonna stay in your place, like don't expect me to like be there to hear you complain, or be there to hear your toxic thoughts, or you want advice and then I give you advice and you don't follow it, or don't expect any of that, because I'm not in this relationship for that, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. So it's kind of just being like, well, look, this is on your terms. Like if you want to work on yourself and then come to me and be like, let's try and pick things up, or let's try and have a friendship again or something, then it's kind of leaving things on their terms, because you can't, it's hard enough trying to do things for yourself that are good and then having to feel like you've got to constantly bring up the people around you. It's tough, because that takes a lot of energy.
And people, unfortunately, it's like none of us walk around that are like trying to be better. It's not as if that we're this unlimited resource of positivity.
Exactly.
A lot of the time it can be, you're trying to get into that mindset, and the good mindsets do build and they compound and stuff, but it's very tricky then to go and sit in a room full of people that you used to hang out with, and they're not on that page, and everything you hear is bad, and everything that's coming at you is toxic, or it's like, this is, you're not happy, and it's not my and this, I think, like, this is probably one of the most important lessons that I've learned in the past 10 years, which is a really hard thing to get your head around. But you as an individual, no matter how strong you are, no matter how collected you are, you cannot change someone. No. Like you can't. I feel like I've spent years trying to change people that are very close to me, and you can't do it. It's impossible. And it doesn't matter how hard you try. It has to come from something that has to happen within them to get for that to happen. And it just doesn't work like that, where you think that you can save someone or rescue someone, or you think that you can take someone's life and make it better. It's, in small ways, of course you can, but on a big scale where you're talking about meaningful, lasting change,
it's,
you can't do it. That has
doable.
It just that has to come from them.
It's like that thing of like, if you're like in the sea, you're in the middle of the sea with someone and you're both there. If you don't want to survive, it's like you can either try and survive together, help each other, or one person can like be on the other person's shoulders. Do you know what I mean? To keep them up. And I think if you're trying to seriously help someone from like, metaphorically drowning, it's kind of impossible without sacrificing yourself. And long term, I'm talking, obviously everyone should try and be nice to people and help people, but when it's from our experience and stuff with family or friends, it's like you can't be that person for someone. It's not
really
sustainable,
tough.
and
it's really it's not unfortunate.
Even tougher when it's family as well.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is that you can change yourself, like, and that does come from within, and that's more
the most powerful thing.
That's more empowering. You being able to change yourself and have that as a long lasting effect
Start
is
with
better.
Yourself,
than you trying to change someone else. And it is tough because, you know, you're talking, especially if you're talking about relationships here, if they're family relationships, they're like hardwired. So that's really hard stuff to try and the idea of trying to like walk away from a family situation, you know, that's really difficult because, you know,
it's your family.
It's your family. And but here's the thing. It's like, if you go and put real, speaking from experience, there was, when I was a bit younger, I was like, there was this, for me, it was like, I felt like I had to walk away from some of my family relationships because they felt very intrinsically like toxic and manipulative and not helpful, like really toxic. And then you go and do work on yourself, like real work, to the point now where I feel like I'm quite collected, I'm quite hardened and robust, in a robust mindset. So now it feels like that I can sort of go back and traverse that boundary a little bit and sort of come and go to the point where it's like, you can't really hurt me because I know that I'm collected within myself because I've put the time and effort in to go through that.
Because to do that.
Yeah. Whereas if I hadn't have done that, there's probably a part of me that would still be in a mindset of feeling of having like resentment and anger and frustration. So you have to sort of be able to sort of walk away and be like, all right, I need to put this effort in that's good with me. So because there's always going to be relationships that realistically you can't walk away from, particularly like family relationships. Like those are very hard. You know, if you know, I always think it's that thing. It's like if you had a child or a brother or a parent and it was a toxic relationship, the idea of walking away from that and then something happens where it's like you get a call and they're on their deathbed, that's going to be a very hard thing to sort of get peace from, if you're like, well, you know, especially if you knew that you were the stronger person in that situation. If you knew that you were stronger and more collected and that they were the ones that were vulnerable and as a result potentially a bit toxic.
Especially when mental health's involved.
There has to be a certain element there where it's like, okay, well, and this is just talking from experience, but in my experience, it was always better to make sure that my mental health and that my sort of mental outset was reinforced and strong, so that I could sort of step back in and help and do the right thing in terms of what that relationship needed. Where it's like, okay, well, I can listen to you, I can look after you to an extent, I can give you helpful resources, and I can walk out of it still fine. Like, you know, as opposed to being like, no, you've hurt me, so the door's closed and you'll never interact with me again. Because in some ways that's gonna come up to potentially haunt you later on down the line, if that makes sense.
And it's like a misconception that like prioritizing yourself, putting yourself first and stuff, it's like, oh well, you're selfish. It's like you've got friends that are struggling, but you're not going to help them, you're selfish. Like your family is struggling, you're not going to help them, you're selfish. Like I don't think it's that straightforward. No. I think it's like if someone is behaving toxic towards you, that could be for a host of reasons, you know, some maybe more valid than others. It's like if you just submit yourself to that constantly with no sense of boundaries or what's fair for you, who does that benefit? Like it definitely doesn't benefit you because you feel like shit. Doesn't benefit the other person. You might think that it's benefiting them, but it's really not. It's kind of just then a cycle. You know, it's no one's really trying to help the other person. It's like a what's that, like a codependency sort of thing. Whereas like what you've just said, like being able to step away from people or situations to really work on yourself, it's the most selfless thing you can do, because now not only are you now like really solid in yourself, you're feeling really stable, you've got good things going, your day to day is good. That can only radiate into the other people in your life, maybe that do need it, or the people that are struggling, because what's the point in all of us just sat round complaining, you know? And it's a tough one though, because it can feel innately selfish and wrong when it's like, but especially when people go round and round the same problems, it's like...
And I bet if people examined that, they'd probably find that that's what happens a lot.
Yeah, it's not like, it's not like, oh, your friend, I don't know, gets diagnosed with a serious illness and is upset. Yeah. It's not healthy to go, oh, you're being really negative and toxic right now, I'm not going to speak to you. Like, obviously not. Like, that goes without saying, but when people are like, oh, God, like, I've got one of my closest friends is always treating me this way, and this is so bad, and you go, well, you know, they're probably not that good of a friend, like, probably not great. And then they go like, yeah, no, I know you're right. And then the next time you see them, it's the exact same story, or it's the exact same story but for somebody else, and you're thinking, nah, this is you, like, you're defo. It's like, it's
every
me.
time I come into a room,
it's me, hi, I'm the problem.
Someone else is like, it's always someone else's fault. That is, you know, because now it's like, I've tried to adopt this thing where it's like, if anything goes wrong ever, I really try and always take responsibility, even if there's a big part of me that thinks that's not my fault.
It's really not easy though doing that.
And it's not, because you
even reframing. Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
Even reframing the way things happen, like say, oh yes, the other day I was feeling anxious and annoyed, and I was like, oh, this situation, it's the situation's fault that I'm feeling anxious and quite pissed off right now. And it's like, no. I'm feeling that way because I'm choosing to feel that way. Like, this inanimate situation, inanimate object, inanimate room isn't actually doing anything other than existing, and I'm projecting onto it these problems. And it's like, it's so difficult to, like you say, take responsibility and be like, I'm literally the problem right now. Like, my mindset is what's making me pissed off.
Because you can always change your mindset, and you can always remove yourself from a situation. And I feel like those, and it goes with people. Like, I'm trying to think of a useful example where something might happen. You know, you know, I'm trying to think of something in real time. There was so just then when we were coming, so we've just been in Manchester, so we've just drove back from Manchester, and when you were in the wrong lane and we had to go around and we had to go around this big roundabout. So in that moment, I felt a bit of frustration, because I was thinking, because I knew that you had to be in the other lane, but I didn't say anything, and then you couldn't get in the other lane, and then we had to drive around. And then we were in this big traffic jam. So like we needed to go around a lot, and there was two things there. It's like, well, one, there's really no need to be frustrated there. So one, I'm just allowing my mindset to overtake there and say, well, what, you know, you're still gonna get home if it makes 5 minutes difference. It's not a big deal. So why is that? But then I also thought to myself, it was like, well, I've really also got no need to be annoyed, because I could have opened my mouth and said, oh, look, you need to be in that lane. Or even removing yourself further, I could have said, no, let me drive.
Yeah, I get you. Like, you're not the one driving. Like,
and generally speaking, if we're driving, I might do more of the driving.
You probably do more. I'm way more of a passenger princess.
And I feel like I'm way more of I just have more of that practical mindset a little bit.
About that.
Only when it comes to driving and stuff. Like,
I think I'm a really adequate driver.
You're a great driver, but I feel as if that when...
Well, people get in the wrong lane, especially in a city where you're unfamiliar and your GPS doesn't tell you what lane to get in.
100%. But you know how sometimes I'll say to you, like, I actually prefer driving. I feel more calm I
prefer you driving, but maybe that's because low key I feel like you're judging my driving.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that.
We can talk about that when the podcast is finished.
Yeah. But
I understand what you mean. Like,
but it was just that thing of, like, I was just trying to give a real, like, that was the only thing I could think of that was real. It was that thing of...
There was nothing you could have done there to prevent that. Even if you'd have said it, it's like that thing of, like... Well, it's really difficult saying it and you're not the driver, like, you know.
And if it was something that really was like, if I was really like, oh, you know, like, that's
really got to me.
Or not even really got to me, but it's like, it's like if we're driving and it's different for me because I feel as if that in the past it's like when I have that sense of control with like IBS and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'll always feel like, well, if I'm driving, I feel like I'm more in control, which helps the situation. Yeah. But in that situation, it's like, well, if I voluntarily surrender that and say, well, yeah, you drive, you take, then I've sort of given that responsibility away. Yeah. But then I still have to take it on and say it's not their fault, it's not Meg's fault, it's not your fault if you didn't get in the right lane on time, or that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And just because I might be more highly strung when it comes to that, that's more of a me thing. I have to learn in the same situation. You have to learn to be like, well, that's on you. That you could have done something about that situation.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing applies to lots of relationship things where it's like you might think that you're just making excuses for someone else, or it's like, well, they've got this or they've got that. And I think deep down, when you start being hard on yourself and you start being like, no, this is you. If you're keeping these people around, you've got that. That's up to you. That's your choice. Like you can stop that, no matter how difficult it may be, or like with things like FOMO and stuff, and but they've been my friend for a long time, and
or like making excuses for people, being like, oh well, they're really vulnerable in this way, so I accept a certain level of like shit taken from them, or things like that. And it is nuance. Like every situation, every friendship, every relationship is very nuanced. Like, and nobody's perfect. Like no one can perfectly say the right thing every single time or act in the right way every single time. But when it's a pattern of like behaviour, a pattern of, what do they say on The Office, a pattern of disrespectful and something, that line that you like rehearsed for Jan.
I don't remember that.
Do you remember when Jan's getting fired or sued, and he's like, it was a pattern of disrespectful and something behaviour, and he like repeats it over and over again. But yeah, when it is a pattern, it's a bit like, okay, well, how many excuses can I make for this person, or how many times can I blame things that happen to me on them? And it's like, I don't know. It's really tough though, because we all do love something or someone to blame for something. It feels really good when something's not your fault, and when it's easy to jump to putting it on something. It's like, yeah, that's why this is going wrong. It's because of them, or it's because of this thing or this other external situation. And sometimes it does happen and it is totally someone else's fault, and that's like score.
It's but like if someone crashes into, if you're parked and someone crashes into you, you can't say,
you can take
well, I should have taken a different route because I knew, if something like that, or if you're walking down the street and a plane hits you, it's like, that's not your fault. It's just like,
that'd be so
rare.
Well,
or a car. I think I meant a car. I think I meant if a car hits you when you're walking down the street. Or
I got hit by a plane. I wonder if that's ever happened to someone.
And they've survived to tell the tale. But it's alright, I had third party, so that's that's okay. But in situations like that, you don't need to draw straws. But I think there's something very powerful about any juncture in your life that happens that you weren't satisfied with. If you hold yourself to a high standard and really put yourself under the microscope and say, could I have done something to remove that potential hazard or stress from my life? And if you really put the microscope under, a lot of the time it'll be like, because I shouldn't have been hanging around with those people. I shouldn't have put myself in that situation. I know that I have a proclivity for going on a bender, or for, when someone says, oh, come on, let's get some, let's go out. And it's like, did you go and hang out with this person knowing that was kind of what was going to happen? There's lots of subtle things where you can take responsibility. And I think that the older that you get, the more times that you take on that responsibility, it's another thing of like how robust your mindset becomes. You just sort of go like, well, you start having way more respect for yourself, and you start being able to navigate tricky situations easier. You're able to say,
you can spot red flags easier as well.
You can see things before they even arise. Like, you can be in a situation and pick up on very small nuances of people, and that something might kick off, or something might lead to something else, and and you can very quickly say, okay, I've had fun, I'm gonna see you, and you're off and you're gone, and you don't have to worry about never have to worry about and and then going forward, you don't have to go back, because if you go back, it's good. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's the biggest red. People talk about red flags. Like, it's the biggest red flag in a person when they can't spot red flags. Like when you've got a friend, like a friend will say something, or if you thought that the message that we got that was anonymous about, how to like get out of a toxic relationship or things like that, and it's like not a red flag in a nasty way, but when someone is just willingly letting this person take them for a ride, or when someone is just like, it feels obvious to you that something's not good, and then you get into like scary territory with like domestic abuse and domestic violence, when someone can't spot these like problem areas of people, or the way people behave, and it's really tough.
I'd probably refute that a bit. I'd probably say that a lot of the idea of like someone not being able to spot red flags, because I feel like I've been that person, and I feel as if that I've been unable to spot.
Oh, me too.
And
Sure.
Sometimes it's so deep rooted. Like when you think about, a lot of the time, if you think about like when you're younger, your parents will have red flags, and and because you love them dearly, you will overlook it, and because you're young, you don't really understand how toxic, or
you won't. No,
or not even toxic, just the idea of something being like not constructive. So I think maybe for me it'd be this idea of like, okay, look, maybe they're not on the part of the journey that someone else is, where someone else has a very attuned level of self-awareness and a palate for shit, so they avoid it. But maybe it's a case of like okay, like they are self-aware enough to know that something's not right, but they don't know the length of which some form of behavior is acceptable, where you can say, well, let's try and talk about that, and let's try and work on that, and then to the extent where it's like, oh no, like you're actually just, this is terrible, and we shouldn't hang
that's
around,
fair enough. Maybe I'm just thinking about it a bit harshly, of like, when people just it feels like people aren't really thinking about that sort of thing when someone says something, and you think, well, I wouldn't hang around with them, and they're like, well, like they're this and this and this, and it's like, yeah, but that thing you just said before sounded really bad. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Did you get the impression the message was about a romantic relationship, or?
No, I don't think it was romantic. I mean,
friendship?
I can look at it now. I just have to.
You. I was just gonna say,
we've probably got enough on our phones, right? We've got like
that'll do.
I
was gonna say, if you wanted to have you don't have to read it, but if you just wanted to get an impression, and then if we actually did have a piece of practical advice of like...
I keep getting called from Scotland.
You had a call before.
I don't know what that's about.
Could be a gig. Could be a podcast sponsor.
It's probably a tax.
Scottish Air,
it's probably to do with taxes, I imagine, or something. I don't know. It's no news is good news.
Well, that is news, because they're phoning you.
Oh, well, it's no news if I refuse to answer, so... No, because
people would say the same about like bills.
Well, no, that's actually that's what I was gonna say. That's a real life. That's a real life example of like how I can tackle that. I should call them back now on camera and be like, I'm not afraid of having phone calls.
Do you remember when you made that video? Because I find this really funny when you get a phone call from an unknown number, and it is even for me. I don't feel like I'm an anxious person, but it gives me so much anxiety when I see them call, and I'm like, who the fuck's this? I'm like, if I don't have their number, like, who could it be? It's probably a scam, but what if it's not? What if it's someone who's using a different phone and it's an emergency? Like, who could it be? Blah, 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 blah. And then it would all be so easily sorted if I just answered, or at least phoned them back.
Well, that's the thing, because it's never going to be...
And then you made that video, and it was like they hang up, and you're like, oh God, thank God. And then like they call back, and you're like, no, please, no. And then you answer, it was, have you even missold PPI?
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was really, I find that so funny, mate. It's like, oh, for God's sake.
I need to rewatch that. That was good. No, I think it's.
Or you can copy and paste the number into Google.
I'm pretty sure it's just our energy provider.
Is it really?
I'm pretty sure they're based in Scotland, and I think we moved over. Anyway, no, going back to the thing. I don't think the question was this: how do I know I'm cutting out friendships that don't serve me? serve me anymore for the right reasons, and not just because I'm in a relationship.
Right, okay.
So there wasn't I didn't pick up on a romantic angle there.
But I guess it was, how do you know you're cutting out friendships for the right reasons? Well, because they don't serve you. Like, if you're feeling like you've met up with them, or like, you know, you're like, oh, let's hang out. Like, if they're like, oh, let's go to the pub, and you're like, well, I'm trying to like not drink, and you're like, oh, let's go for coffee, and they're like, nah, boring. You're like, there's one where it's like, well, why don't you want to meet me in this way where we can actually talk and hang out and, you know, not be surrounded by hooligans, you know. Hooligans. No, just not be in that environment where drink is a temptation. And then it's like, okay, you might meet up with them for coffee, and then it's like, you know, you sit there, they talk a lot about maybe their problems, they've got a lot of dramas going on that all sound kind of like the same problems they're always having, or they're not asking you any questions, they're not interested in what you've been up to, or things like that. These are all things that I have experienced as well, where you just think, well, I've kind of just been dumped on there, like emotionally dumped on, and I don't feel like I've gotten any sense of like goodness. You know, you're walking away from it thinking like, oh, that did not feel nice, like that didn't feel good, and you know. So I guess that would be how you'd know it wasn't good. But then the other side of it though, where if you, like you say, like if you're in a relationship, so how do you know you're cutting out people for the right reasons? Then that's a tricky one, because you'd hopefully have a good balance with your relationship and social life of other friends. And
so having a social life is very important.
It is really important.
It's very, very important, and I think it's
with the right people. It's
that's
important,
the thing. It's the relationships that you have with people have to be the right kind, and they have to be constructive. And I think it's quite simple. Like if you're not sure, just like there's probably like off the top of my head like 5 questions that you could just ask yourself based on the relationship. It's like, are you guys mates? And you go yeah. And it's like, all right, does this person, and also do you do this in return? Because you know it's easy to always set someone else up as the bad person. Not saying that we're bad innately, because if you're the one that's trying to move away from it for the right reasons, you're not going to want to, you know, there's only, it's like you're putting in the effort to try and better yourself, right? And if you're trying to bring that into a dynamic where someone's refuting that, where you're not going to want to put the effort in, because it's like it's doubly hard to say, hey, should we go for a coffee and a run, as opposed to, hey, you want to smoke a joint and I go for a drink? You know, that's way, you know, one of them is much more harder. But you know, I think that you can sit there and just say like, you know, does this person get in touch with you off their own back and ask you how you're doing? Because that rarely happens in my world, and I feel as if that when I do receive a message where it's like, hey man, how's things going, what you up to these days, it's like, oh wow, like that's
it does make a difference, where you're like, wow, that's nice.
And especially then where that conversation just goes nowhere, and it's like oh great, yeah, cool, what are you doing? Oh brilliant, oh that's awesome, oh great, brilliant. A lot of the time it'll be, hey man, how's it going? And I'm typing, I'm like, yeah, great, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll come back with like, I don't know, hey I don't know.
Don't need to like borrow something, or
I've seen you've got a Fender Strat that looks sick. Can I borrow it? And then like, that's never happened. I just mean no, but it'll be.
Something along the lines of like they were only getting in touch with you because they
you need something, or you're asking And I know that it's and to a certain extent that's fine, that's okay, because you know it's like that's
when you've got that solid friendship with someone,
and
that's fine.
And those transactions are all right, because I do that sometimes as well. I just mean that, you know, in the premise of it being in a friendship, it's like, do people call you up and say, hey, how's it going, and they talk to you, and it's just for the sake of talking to you? Do they do that? You know, when it's like, does the person show a genuine interest in your life? Do they bum you up when you tell them things that you're trying to do? Do they encourage you? Is there support? Is there like, do they make it about you, you know, and vice versa? Because, you know, I feel like that's the whole thing in conversations, right? Like,
do they take your advice, even if they are struggling with something and you give them some advice? Do they take it and respect you? And
do they you know, do they feel grateful that does they feel like there's a genuine thing there where it's like you're both grateful of the relationship,
Yeah.
you know? Do you make each other laugh genuinely? Is it like, is this like, you know, little things like that? Because a lot of the time when I feel as if that when I've got friendships that I say, yeah, we're mates, it's like if I'm hard on it and I say, well, you know, are you guys really mates? Like, do you hear off this person a lot?
There's a big
like,
spectrum of mates, isn't there?
but in terms of, but I feel like the older you get, I feel as if that you, for me anyway, I feel as if that there has to be a higher level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
Because I think I've made the mistake in the past of, and this is just a personal, because I might be I'm 27. The people listening might be younger, so yeah, you know, there are different scopes of, you can have casual friendships.
There's
You
like
can
people
have,
that you'll like see in the street and have a chat with.
yeah,
There'll be
for
people
sure.
that maybe people that you've known a long time, but you don't really hang out anymore. But you'll always exchange a few words or have a catch up like once a year or something, and it's really fun. And just because you don't, that's what I mean. Just because you don't chat on the daily or catch up with each other a lot, it doesn't mean you can't have a solid friendship with them, because it has to just be the right person for the right, not job, but like for the right role in your life.
You gotta like, if you're on a specific path, if you're into something and you're doing something and you're moving in one area and you know you're exploring a path in life, if the other person isn't, that's fine, but you know, you both can be heading in different places, so there's got to be some mutual ground that you guys can cross together. And I find that a lot of the time that doesn't always happen, especially if you're in a growth mindset, a real growth mindset, where it's like, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm trying to get better and I'm trying to further myself. A lot of the time that can be hard to carry with somebody else. But with that said, I think it's like relationships, with social relationships and having a social life is like, it's an incredibly big pillar in having a good mental health.
Absolutely,
you need to have relationships with people. I just think it's more a case of, it's okay to refine it, and it's better actually to sort of refine it to a point where you say, like, this actually isn't healthy, like, and I'd rather step back from this relationship and not have that social connection with someone and just be solo, and spend time putting it in finding a social relationship, like a friendship, where it's like, oh no, like this is much more positive, it's much more healthy, it's much more constructive. And just a final thought on this, a lot people might not like it, including myself, but relationships where you can actually have conflict and you can actually say, hey, like, that's not cool, and the other person says, well, why? And you say, well, this, and you say, well, that, and then you have a bit of a conflict about it, you have it out, and then you say, oh, look,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm sorry about that, like, you know, like, and you can kiss and make up, and because a lot of the time people can't. A lot of the time, what it actually is, it's all, oh, is that a sly comment there? Well, what's that about? And then it's
passive
like, or passive aggressive, or are we cool? Because you're not really talking. And it's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's like, no, there's clearly something wrong.
That's not nice.
Gets to a point where you have to just say, either tell me what's going on, or we can just leave it there, because life's too short to have these tiny little microaggressions. So
true.
So a lot of the time, the friendship that you think is the ideal friendship isn't. It might actually come from a friendship where it's like, God, there is a bit of conflict, or there is a bit of give and take, a bit of this and that. I don't know what I'm trying to get, give and take. I don't know. Yeah, conflict, and sometimes it'll teach you more to have learning how to navigate that friendship with conflict than it will just being in this friendship that you think is very ideal, and oh, it's all fine, and we do this and we do that, and we don't argue, and it's like, well, okay, but are you really being honest with each other there? Are you being honest with yourselves?
That's true,
you know?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. My final little thought would be, like you just said, like your life is short and your time is extremely limited, especially, you work, you sleep, you eat, you got a shower. The time that you have in between all of those things that keep you going every day should be spent with only people that make you feel good.
Yeah.
And I have this a lot because I think that I really enjoy spending time alone, but I really enjoy spending time with you, and that kind of comes before anything. Like, there's nothing that I'd rather do with anyone that I wouldn't rather like share with you and spend that time with you. So then I'm like, right, someone's got to be like really, really good, you know what I mean, for me to be like, yeah, I'm gonna go and hang out with this person, I'm gonna go and do this, because like if I think to myself, I could be hanging out with Mike right now. Do you know what I mean? If I'm with people and I'm like, I could either be enjoying time on my own or being with you. If it doesn't like level on that sort of that ground, then you kind of have to be like, yeah, like there's somewhere else I should be. There's someone else I could be spending this time with, or it could just be on your own, which is always good to be comfortable in your own company. So be like, again, back before, just be selfish with your time. That's what I would say. I guess
that one's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I agree with that. I think it's like when you have a relationship like ours and you hold each other to such a high standard, you know, whenever you do go out into the mainland and you do see people, there is an element of like it's it's like, you know, because you know, you get cozy in your own hub and you think you get into a mindset, and then you go out and it's like, okay, I have to learn how to navigate this a bit. And the problem is like no one's ever going to reach your level, because I see you in a very specific way and you see me in a very specific way, and you can run the risk, you know, when you're a bit younger and when you have that first relationship, when you're at the start of a relationship, you know, it's like the whole world goes to hell. It's like, oh, I don't give a crap about any of these people. And that can be dangerous, and I can't hold anyone else up to the same standard that I do hold you.
No, it's not about that, but thinking like, if I am being selfish with my time, there are only, what I'm trying to say is that really there's like a handful of people probably that are worth your time, and those are the people worth putting the time into, and you get something out of that as well.
Yeah, right.
You know. And
the sad thing is that the reality is that you're probably not going to find those people in a pub or a bar at 1 a.m. And I know that sounds a bit judgy and a bit high and mighty, but and I'm not saying that you have to.
Isn't the best place to find a lover.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you have to find them on a run. And I'm not saying that you have to find them in a juice bar either. I just mean that for a lot of the time, you know, if you know that there's certain traits there that aren't gonna be helpful, well then it's gonna be very tricky to find someone that doesn't exhibit those traits in a place where
people aren't even themselves, whether inebriated.
Again, I know that it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to the pubs and the drinkers, but you know, and it's like, I've met people at the pub and I've met people out and about on a night out, if you want to call it that, and it's like you're all right, and it's like I'm all right, and it's like we're just two all right people, and that's fine. But I feel like in terms of these lasting relationships where it's like you feel like you can invest and it's real and it's not shrouded and there's a smoke screen of like, oh, you know, we're high and we're gonna go and get high, or there's like we're drunk, or it's
smoke.
It's under this premise of like, this isn't real. I'm not speaking to the real person here. I'm speaking to just a version of them.
And you're also a different person when that literal smoke screen's gone. So it's
And this is I feel like this is maybe my final point here, and it maybe will lead on to another podcast. I feel as if that for me, what was a big thing was that you have to let go of who you think you are in terms of your ego. And I feel like this might sound
a big one.
That's what I mean. So we can leave this for another episode. But like the idea of like when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, probably even 24,
the other
little bit this morning, there was a real sense of like, I'm a guitar player. You know, I play music. I write music. I'm a musician. I'm cool, you know. I'm not in a suit. I'm in flares. I'm got my hair done nice. I smoke the reefer. I smoke cigarette. Marlboro. You know, I had packs of Marlboro from America, which just had the actual Marlboro packet on. You know, that didn't have the health warnings.
Nigel Farage on.
Yeah. You know, it's winter and it's like it's raining out. I'm still wearing the thickest Wayfarer glasses you've ever seen. There was an element of like, I'm just acting out this ego, this amalgamation of people that I've seen, thought I'm like them, you know. And then as a result, then I go and hang out at the pub. I go and hang out at the, you know, the record shop / pub. I go and hang, you know, I'm there. It's all about the music. It's the music, man. Yeah, you know, let's talk about what's your favorite Bob Dylan song. Oh, give us another ciggy. All that crap. And you realize it's like, that's not you. And I don't know what that that facade looks like for you. You'll have to figure that out, and you'll have to come to terms with that. But it's very hard letting that go as well. You have to let that ego go, and you have to realize it's like who's the real person at the center of that. And a lot of the time you'll find that it's probably someone that's vulnerable and afraid and scared and that needs a lot of work and needs a lot of affirmation, and you need to rebuild yourself in a lot of ways. But I think it's that whole thing, isn't it? It's like, the death of your ego. Once that happens, you can start to rebuild. But you don't need to fucking eat a load of mushrooms or take LSD to know that. All you have to do is like seriously just look at yourself for real.
Yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, and but you'll know, because I feel like I didn't need a big moment to be like, oh my God, I'm not Bob Dylan's long lost son. I'm not Jeff Buckley.
I'm good enough just as I am.
No, I'm not. Oh. No, I'm not. I know. But I could be, if I really focused on what it is that I want to be, and who I want to be, and what's the best version of myself I can be. Because I'm never going to be Bob Dylan, and I shouldn't try. And I'm never going to be Paul McCartney or someone else. It's like I can just be me. And a lot of the time, you don't need all that noise. You don't need the noise of other people, and you don't need all that shit that you put into your body to get there.
I get you. You dress so much like Mac DeMarco right now.
Is it just a hat?
Is it?
I'm really trying hats at the minute, and I'm struggling.
It's a really good look for you.
Well, thanks a lot, because I do feel quite.
I just feel like Mac DeMarco would wear your exact outfit right now.
Well, I am wearing a Gymshark. I don't think
he probably wouldn't wear one of them.
And I'm wearing a Gymshark socks. I'm not sure.
I don't think he would wear Gymshark.
Hasn't he recently done a big 180?
Last I heard that he was like, he's gone on the straight and narrow. Not drinking or drugs or anything. That's the last thing I heard.
Wow.
So yeah.
Well, that's great. I hope he's doing well. And,
Hope you're doing well, Matt DeMarco, if you're listening. Should we just spend the last few minutes just talking about the May?
We did have two people write in quickly just about, because I'd feel bad if.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, of
I'd
course.
feel bad if we didn't mention
them.
This was specifically about how you deal with loss and or letting go of certain things. I'll keep these anonymous too. We had one person say, focus on the thing, brackets, no matter how small, brackets, that makes you happy. It's a new one for me, but it helps. And then we spoke about this for a little bit, and they were saying that they've picked up bass guitar and they're learning how to play bass, cool. And they're learning certain bass techniques.
Very cool.
Which is great. It's that idea, isn't it, of doing it for the right reasons, like pick up an instrument and because you love the instrument and you want to learn about it, and the guy, he was saying that I've kind of given it away with I've just said, well, not really, I've said he. I assume he's a he. I think he's a he. Shit.
What was the other one?
Let's say he. Let's say they, just in case.
Sure.
Or that. Dude, we'll say dude. Because everyone's a dude. But yeah, no, we had a nice conversation, and that was nice. And then the other person said, this is nice, in order to let go, I had to forgive myself for blaming myself for so long. That helped massively.
That's nice, yeah. I like that.
I suppose a lot of the time it does start with that. You do have to
self-acceptance.
Yeah, and forgive, and forgiving yourself is very powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't really change the past now, but you can spend every day making yourself better.
Absolutely. And it's a tough thing to do, to basically, that idea of saying like, look, like, it's not, the blame doesn't help anyone, does it? No. It's like trying to find someone to point the finger at, even if it is yourself. The idea of taking responsibility is good, but that's different from blame. It's like blame has this onus of, or this feeling of like, oh, like, it's your fault, you're horrible, like it's a bad thing.
Or guilt. Guilt is like the saddest emotion, I think, because it doesn't lead anywhere. But thanks for writing in, guys.
Yeah, thanks very much. They were really inspiring, and it was nice to talk to you both about that kind of stuff. It was inspiring for me.
Lovely. So yeah, just a couple of minutes right at the end, just to say that starting May the 1st, so May is Mental Health Awareness Month officially in the UK, and there's also a week in particular of May, I think it might be the second week, that is official Mental Health Awareness Week, but May is generally classed as like Mental Health Month. in the UK. So we're doing a 30-day, technically 31, but 30 sounds better really. 30-day challenge for May, Mental Health Awareness Month, where we're going to post something every day on our Mike and Meg page on Instagram that is something that hopefully everyone is able to do, that is just one small thing that day that overall is like a small habit that can hopefully improve mental health. So it's everything. We're going to do like little walks, talk about things like nice things, about social life or creativity, meditation, like just loads of things, 31 things in particular that are going to be different every day that hopefully can inspire you to take 10 minutes out of your day to improve it. And then at the end of May you'll have built up all of these tools that then hopefully even if you just took a handful into the rest of the week or year or anything, that I don't know, I think could really change. And it's a good thing to have this like challenge feeling behind it of some things haven't been going great recently, or I've been feeling this way, and I'm gonna like take this month now as like this month could really change my life. But
it's very exciting. We're both excited about it, and because I feel like it'll be nice for the two of us as well to actually sit and be like, okay, what are some actual tangible things that you can do daily, and some of them you don't have to do daily, some of them will be more like weekly or whatever, but that can help. And the idea of us doing it with people, and it's like, well,
you're not alone,
we're doing it too, and we're we might come across like that we're like these super, it's always good, it's always like we're like everything just pings off us, but we have to protect ourselves too, and we have to hold ourselves up and protect our mental health and
some
physical
of the things
health.
on the list are things that we don't do at the minute I think we could benefit from, or just me personally, I've when we were coming up with the list together, it was like like these are things that you hear and it's that's really good for your mental health, and I'm like, when was the last time I did that? So it's going to be us doing it as well. It's not just us saying you do this, you do that, as if it's so easy. So every day we're going to post in the morning as well, so you can hopefully follow and favorite us, and you get that every day then to be something of inspiration for the day ahead to incorporate. Or sometimes it might be something that you can't just drop everything and do that day, but it could just make you a bit more mindful of something during the day, or think, well, I can't do that today, but this day I'm gonna make a point of writing that in the diary or something to get that done, and things like that.
A lot of the things though are the things that you will find that are things that you can fit in. And more importantly, it's that idea of like of asking yourself,
have I got time for this?
Why? Because we do it all the time. I'll constantly think to myself like, I've not really got time to go to the gym today because I've got blah 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 blah. And then you go, hang on a minute. Like, what's the trade? You haven't
got time to prioritize yourself.
Your leg's off, and it's like no, it's like you've got no excuse, and
so true.
And a lot of the time you do have to be that ruthless. You do have to say like, what's the reason that you can't do this right now? And a lot of the time you'll find that there is no excuse.
Or even thinking like, no, I'm feeling shit today. That's not going to help me. Listening to a podcast plug is not going to help me. And then it's like, why are you so quick to dismiss something as ever having any positive benefits?
So if I needed help, let's say that analogy again of like you're drowning. If I'm in the ocean and I need help, and someone says, I can throw you like a bin bag, I'd be like, well, fucking throw anything. I'll take anything right now. Like, let's see if we can figure this out together.
And if that doesn't work, like, what else you got? Because I'm, you know what I mean? Like,
or can I make this work from something that I didn't think I could? I
might be able to fashion the bin bag, whip it full of air, and use it for buoyancy. Like, maybe not. You know what I mean? Like,
it's not always that you don't always get sent an arc, do you? You don't always get sent a lottery ticket. Sometimes you get sent something that's like, how's that going to help me? It's like, well, you'd be surprised what you can do with 2 legs. I meant a run there. I didn't mean like, or squats or
Yeah.
something, you know.
But yeah,
yeah.
movement is actually so every year they change it of what the focus is, and this year for May it is actually movement. So lots of them will be about movement, but not,
Yeah.
you know, it's not you won't find like a marathon on the list. It'll be stuff that's hopefully really accessible and free. Hopefully we're trying to incorporate this thing of trying to make most of them 100% free and accessible to everyone. So yeah, that's what
so we're looking
doing,
forward to
and
doing
that's
that.
what's exciting.
We're starting that on May the 1st. So we'll be doing more announcements on Instagram and on our social media about all of those things, so you can stay in touch.
Yeah.
And as always, you can always let us know either on Instagram or in the comments if there's, you can message us personally, and you can ask if there's anything particularly that would be a nice focus for another podcast episode, or for something that maybe we could help just talk about openly that might be useful. If there's anything like that, please let us know, because we're always happy to take them on. And thanks so much for listening and being a part of our little
corner of the world.
Little corner, yeah.
Lovely jubbly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
bye everyone.
See you later, and have a good week. Bye.
Bye.